Imagine waking up every morning to the roar of a car engine echoing through your window, not from the street but right on your own driveway. Not a delivery truck, not a friendly neighbor's car, but a shiny red SUV driven by none other than Lisa, the self-appointed queen of order of Willow Creek, Oregon. She parks smack in the middle of my driveway like it's her personal lot, blocking my garage entrance without a shred of regard for property rights. And here's the funny part. She insists she has the right to do it because of HOA rules, but I'm not even part of that damn HOA. So grab some popcorn, because things are about to get wild. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the latest video. My name's Ben, and I just moved into this old wooden house in Willow Creek after inheriting it from my grandparents. The neighborhood's a picture-perfect slice of suburban peace. White painted houses with sloped roofs, towering pines lining the main road, and birds chirping instead of blaring car horns. My driveway, neatly paved with concrete, and leading from the street to the garage, was my little point of pride, at least until Lisa decided to claim it as her territory. It all started one morning when I was still half asleep, jolted awake by an engine roaring like thunder. I stumbled out of bed, yanked the curtains aside, and saw a bright red SUV parked dead center in my driveway, its tires leaving 2 black streaks on the concrete I'd scrubbed clean just last week. I threw on a jacket, slipped into flip-flops, and stepped outside to figure out what the hell was going on. The crisp Willow Creek air made me shiver, but what really gave me goosebumps was the sight in front of me. Lisa climbed out of the driver's seat, tall and lanky, with dyed brown hair tied in a ponytail and oversized sunglasses covering most of her face. She wore a tight athletic jacket, held a paper coffee cup, and looked at me like I was some nuisance daring to interrupt her. Her red SUV sat there, completely blocking my driveway, its radio still blaring pop music that echoed through the quiet neighborhood. "Hey," I called, trying to keep my voice calm despite the anger bubbling inside. "This is my driveway. Can you move your car?" Lisa paused, turned slowly, and curled her lips into a smug smirk. "Your driveway?" she repeated, her tone like she was talking to a dim-witted kid. "This is community parking, buddy. The HOA maintains all the driveways in Willow Creek, and I've got every right to park here." She took a sip of her coffee, her eyes behind the sunglasses flicking over me with unshakable confidence. I stood there, mouth agape, trying to process her bizarre logic. "I'm not in the HOA," I shot back, my voice rising with frustration. "This is my private property, with paperwork to prove it." She waved a hand dismissively, like I'd just said something irrelevant. "Doesn't matter," she replied, her tone firm. "All driveways in this neighborhood are under HOA control. You should thank me for keeping order around here." Then, without giving me a chance to respond, she turned on her heel and strutted toward a house 2 lots down, leaving me with her red SUV and a pile of unanswered questions. I watched her go, feeling like I'd just been slapped in the face with pure arrogance. The car stayed put, its tires scuffing the concrete, a soda can rolling out from under it like punctuation to the chaos she'd brought. I went back inside, my head spinning. Who has the gall to park on someone else's land and claim it's their right? But as the morning sun glinted off the SUV's red paint, I knew this wouldn't be my last run-in with Lisa, and I had a hunch things were about to get a whole lot crazier. After that first encounter with Lisa, I'd hoped it was just a dumb fluke. Maybe she'd mixed up properties or was having a bad day, but I was wrong. Dead wrong. The next morning, as the sun barely peeked over Willow Creek's pines, that roaring engine jolted me awake again. I shuffled to the window and sure enough, Lisa's shiny red SUV was parked smack in the middle of my driveway, blocking the garage like it was her officially assigned spot. The tires left 2 fresh black streaks on the concrete, and another soda can rolled out from underneath, like she was deliberately marking her territory. I sighed, telling myself to stay calm. Maybe if I ignored it, she'd get bored and find somewhere else to park. But Lisa wasn't the type to get bored. The next day, and the day after that, the red SUV showed up like clockwork, each time with a new bit of chaos. One day she left a tiny trash bag, just some candy wrappers, and a paper coffee cup right by the tire. Another day, she cranked the radio so loud I could hear every word of some cheesy pop song from inside my house. I started feeling like I was living in a bizarre reality show where Lisa was the star and I was the unwilling audience. I decided to figure out who I was dealing with. One afternoon, while mowing the lawn, I struck up a conversation with Evelyn, the old lady next door. She wore a wide-brimmed straw hat, tending her rose bushes, and seemed like the only person in the neighborhood unafraid of Lisa. She used to be on an HOA board in another neighborhood, Evelyn said, her voice steady like she was reading the news. Got kicked out for being too bossy, made everyone paint their houses the same color, banned dogs under 10 pounds, Crazy stuff like that. Now she's here, bringing that center of the universe attitude with her. I nodded, suddenly understanding why Lisa acted like she owned all of Willow Creek. Understanding was one thing, but I couldn't just stand by forever. One morning, when that familiar engine roared again, I decided to confront her once more. I threw on a jacket, stepped onto the porch, and saw Lisa just finishing parking. She climbed out, still with those oversized sunglasses, and her ever-present coffee cup, looking at me like I was a fly buzzing around her breakfast. Her red SUV had left a long scratch on the concrete this time, probably from turning too sharply. "Hey Lisa," I called, trying to keep my tone civil despite my pounding heart. "Can you stop parking on my driveway? This is private property, not a public lot." She turned, chin raised with unmatched confidence, and smirked. "You still don't get it, do you, Ben?" She knew my name, probably heard it from someone in the neighborhood. "This is a community driveway. The HOA maintains it, and I've got every right to park here." She waved a hand, a gesture both dismissive and theatrical, like I was a nuisance not worth her time. "I'm not in the HOA, I reminded her, my voice rising. "This is my land. You've got no rights here." Lisa shrugged, sipped her coffee, and peered at me over her sunglasses. "Doesn't matter," she said, her tone solid as a rock. "All driveways in this neighborhood are under HOA control. You should feel lucky I'm not reporting you for obstruction." Then, before I could argue back, she hit the remote to lock her car, the beep sounding like an arrogant goodbye, and walked off, leaving me with the red SUV and a heap of frustration with nowhere to go. I stared at the car, feeling the blood rush to my head. The tires had gouged another deep mark in the concrete, and an empty cigarette pack tumbled out from somewhere, rolling across the driveway like a challenge. I went back inside, my mind reeling with the question, how can someone be that shameless? But as I sank onto the couch, hearing her radio faintly in the distance, I realized something. Lisa wasn't just parking on my land, she was declaring war, and I knew I couldn't let it slide forever. After a few weeks of living with Lisa's parking routine, I started getting used to the engine roar every morning, like it was part of Willow Creek's natural alarm clock. But I never got used to my driveway looking more and more like a battlefield. Black tire marks, concrete scratches, and the little gifts Lisa left behind. Cans, cigarette butts, even once a half-eaten sandwich. I tried to be patient, telling myself confronting her again would just waste time. But then Mother Nature stepped in, and I got to witness a scene sweeter than I could have imagined. The night before, a big rain had poured over Willow Creek, turning the neighborhood's dirt roads into mud and softening my driveway like a soaked sponge. I woke up to faint sunlight filtering through the curtains, feeling a rare calm, until the familiar roar of Lisa's red SUV broke it. I pulled the curtains aside, and sure enough, she was pulling into my driveway at a speed like she was in a race. But this time, instead of parking neatly and stepping out with her usual arrogance, the SUV jerked to a stop. The tires spun wildly in the mud, squealing loudly, then sank deep, getting stuck with a satisfying thud right in the middle of the driveway. I stood there, coffee mug in hand, watching through the window with a mix of surprise and delight. Lisa, wearing an oversized baseball cap that looked borrowed, jumped out, her pristine white sneakers instantly caked in mud. She flailed her arms, yelling something I couldn't make out, then started yanking on the door like she could single-handedly pull the multi-ton SUV out of the muck. When that failed, she spun around, and of course, her eyes locked onto me, standing on the porch, watching the whole thing with an unhideable grin. "This is your fault," Lisa screamed, pointing at me with a red manicured finger. Her voice was shrill, drowning out the morning birds. "What did you do to this driveway?" I raised an eyebrow, stepping off the porch in my flip-flops, coffee still in hand. "My fault?" I asked, keeping my tone calm despite the laughter bubbling inside. "I didn't do anything. You're the one who drove in here and got stuck." Lisa huffed, her face flushing under the cap's brim. "You should have maintained this driveway better," she snapped, stomping her foot and splattering mud onto her no longer white shoes. "If you'd put up a warning sign or something, I wouldn't be stuck like this." I crossed my arms, staring at her in disbelief. "You mean a sign that says don't park on my driveway?" I asked, a hint of sarcasm creeping in. "I thought you already knew this was my land." She glared, her lips pressing into a thin line. "You know what I mean," she growled, then turned back to the SUV, yanking the door harder like that'd change anything. When it didn't budge, she faced me again, panting. "Fine, you're going to help me push it out, right? This is your mess, so you fix it." I took a slow sip of coffee, dragging out the moment. "No," I said, short and firm. "I'm not pushing your car. You drove it in here, you figure it out." Lisa's face turned redder than her SUV. She stomped again, mud flying everywhere, and yelled, "You're the worst neighbor I've ever met. I'm reporting you to the HOA for this attitude." Then she pulled her phone from her jacket pocket, making a big show of dialing with exaggerated motions, but ended up not actually calling. She spun around, stomping off in her muddy shoes, leaving the stuck car in the driveway, like a giant piece of trash. I stood there staring at the red SUV sunk in the mud, feeling like I just won a small chess match without lifting a finger. Part of me wanted to call a tow truck just to see Lisa pay for her mistake, but I decided to let her deal with it. This was my land, and if she wanted to turn it into a parking lot, she'd face the consequences. As I headed back inside, Lisa's distant shouts still echoed, but this time, I didn't care. Maybe this was the start of something bigger, and I was ready to face it. Lisa's red SUV stayed stuck in my driveway for hours after she stormed off in a rage. I sat inside, sipping coffee, occasionally glancing out the window to see if she'd return with some crazy plan. But instead of Lisa, a different figure appeared late that afternoon, a tall, slightly hunched man in a worn plaid shirt and a baseball cap. He approached the SUV, a rope coil in hand, and started fussing around the muddy mess. I recognized him as Tom, Lisa's husband, who Evelyn had once called the most pitiful guy in this neighborhood. I stepped onto the porch, watching curiously. Tom didn't say a word, just gave me an awkward nod before tying the rope to the SUV's rear bumper. He looked like someone used to cleaning up other people's bad ideas. As he tugged the rope trying to pull the car out of the muck, Lisa emerged from their house, hands on hips, mouth running non-stop. "Hurry up, Tom. I don't have all day to wait for you," she yelled, her shrill voice carrying across Willow Creek. "No one around here has any respect." Tom glanced at me, his tired eyes flashing a silent apology. "Sorry about this," he mumbled, so quiet I had to strain to hear. "She's a little tough when things don't go her way." I nodded, unsure what to say. Tom kept pulling, sweat beading on his forehead, while Lisa stood there directing him like an impatient film director. Finally, with a loud squeal, the SUV broke free from the mud, leaving a long brown streak across my driveway. Lisa didn't thank Tom, just huffed and climbed in, driving off without a backward glance. Watching that, I realized patience wasn't going to solve this problem with Lisa. She wasn't just arrogant, she refused to ever admit she was wrong. I needed to do something, and my first thought was to turn to the HOA, the organization she kept using as her shield. I grabbed a jacket, snatched my keys, and drove to the HOA office in a small building near Willow Creek's entrance. Outside, a faded wooden sign read, "Willow Creek Homeowners Association," looking as worn out as if it too was tired of the neighborhood drama. Inside, I found 3 people around a round table cluttered with papers. Mike, a middle-aged guy with a forced smile, stood to greet me. The other 2, an older woman with silver hair, and a younger man fiddling with his phone, looked up at me with curiosity. I sat down, took a deep breath, and laid out the story about Lisa, how she parked on my driveway every day, cited HOA rules, and just that morning got her car stuck in the mud, and blamed me. "I'm not in the HOA," I stressed. "She's trespassing on my private property." Mike scratched his head, exchanging looks with the others. We know Lisa," he said, hesitating. "She's been a problem for a while, but there's not much we can do." The silver-haired woman sighed, like she'd heard this tale 100 times. "She bothers everyone," she said. "We've warned her, but she doesn't listen." I frowned, frustration rising. "So what? You just let her do whatever she wants?" Mike shrugged, his forced smile growing. "She's stubborn as hell, but," he lowered his voice, glancing around like Lisa might be eavesdropping, "if you really want her to stop, you've got to play her game." I raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Mike leaned forward, whispering. "She thinks HOA rules protect her, but they don't. If you push back, use her own rules against her, she'll trip herself up without realizing it." He sat back, shrugging again. "Just a suggestion." I left the HOA office with my head spinning. Mike's advice was vague, but it planted a seed. As I drove home, I heard the red SUV's engine in the distance. Lisa was back on my driveway, like the morning's fiasco never happened. But this time, I wasn't just annoyed. I had an idea, and maybe it was time to put it into action. Mike's suggestion from the HOA office kept echoing in my head all night. Play her game, he'd said, and I started realizing that patience or empty arguments with Lisa would get me nowhere. If she wanted to use HOA rules as a shield, I'd turn my own driveway into a weapon. The next morning, when the familiar roar of her red SUV sounded outside my window, I didn't just sit and watch anymore. I was ready. I grabbed my phone, checked the battery, and stepped onto the porch just as Lisa parked in the middle of my driveway. She stepped out, still with those oversized sunglasses, and her ever-present coffee cup, glancing around like she was inspecting her territory. I switched on video mode, keeping the phone tucked behind a potted plant on the porch, and recorded every moment. The red SUV blocking my garage, the tires scuffing a fresh black mark on the concrete, and Lisa waving her arms like a queen claiming her throne. As she turned to walk away, I decided to up the ante. If Lisa thought this was a community driveway, then surely I had the right to walk on it too, right? I slipped the phone into my jacket pocket, stepped down to the driveway, and started following her. Not in a creepy stalking way, just a casual stroll, hands in pockets, whistling a random tune. Lisa got a few steps before turning around, and her reaction was worth a whole movie theater's ticket price. Her head whipped around so fast I thought her oversized baseball cap might fly off. Her eyes widened behind the sunglasses, her mouth dropped open, and for a second, I thought she'd topple over from shock. Then, like flipping a switch, she went full drama mode. "What are you doing?" Lisa screamed, her shrill voice ringing through Willow Creek. She bolted back toward her SUV, nearly slipping on the wet grass, and slammed on the brakes, as if I were a threat about to pounce. "You're trespassing. This is private property." I stopped, crossed my arms, and looked at her with deliberate surprise. "Trespassing?" I asked, keeping my voice calm enough to surprise even myself. "What do you mean? This is my driveway. I'm just walking on my own land." She jabbed a finger at me, her red manicured nail trembling with rage. "You're not allowed here," Lisa shouted, her face flushing. "This is my parking spot, and you're harassing me." She flailed her arms wildly, as if calling invisible witnesses to back her up. I smirked, trying not to burst out laughing. "So now it's private property?" I asked, a hint of sarcasm in my tone. "Because just a few days ago, you said it was a community driveway." Lisa froze for a second, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. But she quickly regained her footing, yanking her phone from her jacket pocket with lightning speed. "I'm calling the cops," she yelled, dialing with the determination of someone summoning air support. "You'll see what happens when you stalk me." I stood there, hands still in pockets, letting her finish her performance. Within 10 minutes a patrol car rolled into Willow Creek, lights off but still enough to make a few neighbors peek through their curtains. 2 officers stepped out, an older one with a gray beard and a younger one who looked fresh out of the academy. Lisa charged at them instantly, launching into an Oscar-worthy act. "He's stalking me," she cried, pointing at me like I was the neighborhood's most dangerous criminal. "I was just parking when he started following me, filming me, threatening me. I don't feel safe anymore." I let her talk, standing still with a faint smile. When the officers turned to me, the older one raised an eyebrow like he was asking, "What's this about?" I pulled out my phone, opened the videos from this morning and the days before, and handed it over. "This is my driveway," I explained, my voice even. "She parks here every day, even though I've told her it's private property. Today I just walked on my own land and filmed it for proof." The older officer watched the video, his nose huffing like he was stifling a laugh. He turned to Lisa. "This is his land?" he asked, gesturing toward me. Lisa hesitated, then nodded with the confidence of a kid caught stealing cookies. "Yes, but the HOA doesn't own private property." The younger officer cut in, his tone dry. "Their rules don't override land deeds." Lisa opened her mouth to argue, but the older officer raised a hand to stop her. "You're parking on his land," he said, looking at Lisa. "Him walking on his own driveway isn't harassment." He turned to me. "Do you want to press charges for trespassing?" I pretended to think it over, glancing at Lisa, who was now paling. "Not yet," I replied, "but I'll report it to the HOA." Lisa glared, but this time she didn't say a word. The officers left, and I went back inside, feeling like I'd just scored a small victory. After the cops left, I thought Lisa might lay low, at least to avoid more trouble, but I'd underestimated her arrogance. That afternoon, while I was on the couch watching TV, my phone buzzed with a text from Evelyn, the rose-trimming neighbor lady. "Check the neighborhood forum," she wrote, with a sly smiley face. I opened my laptop, went to the Willow Creek website, and immediately saw Lisa's latest post pinned to the top in all caps. "Urgent action needed to protect our neighborhood." The post was novel length, but the gist was short. Lisa called me a community disruptor, accused me of stalking her, illegally filming her, and threatening everyone's safety. She ended with a dramatic call to arms. "We need to remove people like this from Willow Creek. Sign the petition below to demand he leave." I scrolled to the comments, expecting an angry mob backing her up, but there was nothing. Not a word, not a signature, just an embarrassing silence, like the whole neighborhood had turned its back on Lisa. I smirked, feeling both satisfied and surprised. Maybe the people of Willow Creek weren't as gullible as Lisa thought. I texted Evelyn back. No one signed. She replied instantly. No one wants to deal with her. She once tried to make me repaint my house because it didn't match the neighborhood feng shui. I told her to paint it herself. I laughed, picturing Evelyn wielding her pruning shears and chasing Lisa off her lawn. But I wasn't about to sit back and let Lisa keep spreading rumors. If she wanted to play the community game, I'd play back and play better. I remembered Mike's words from the HOA office. Use her rules. I grabbed my laptop, opened the Willow Creek HOA website, and downloaded the full rulebook, a 30-page document of dry regulations. I skimmed every line, and after a few hours, I struck gold. Lisa's red SUV wasn't registered with the HOA, violating the vehicle clause. Plus her backyard fence encroached on public land. Evelyn had mentioned she'd extended it to show off some ugly planters, and that was banned too. Finally, her noisy parties, with friends' cars blocking my driveway, exceeded the noise limits. I grinned, typing a long email to the HOA, attaching photos of the SUV on my driveway, a neighborhood map showing Lisa's fence over the line, and a recording of party music from a few weeks back. I request a review of these violations. I wrote, keeping my tone polite but firm. If the HOA doesn't act, I'll report this to the city. I hit send, feeling like I just dropped a paper bomb into Lisa's territory. The next day I ran into Evelyn outside while she watered her plants. She tipped her straw hat, grinning wide. She's freaking out, because no one backed her post, she said. I heard from Tom she stayed up all night writing fake comments from other accounts, but no one's buying it. I nodded, telling her about my HOA email. Evelyn clapped her hands, eyes gleaming. Good job, Ben. She stirred up this neighborhood over nonsense before. Banned front yard flags, made people mow in specific patterns. It's about time someone taught her a lesson. I went back inside, feeling relieved but still tense. I knew Lisa wouldn't give up easily, and my email might be pouring fuel on the fire. Sure enough, the next morning, as I brewed coffee, the red SUV's engine roared again. Lisa parked in the middle of my driveway, stepping out with a furious glare. She didn't say a word, just stood there staring through her sunglasses, then walked off. I pulled out my phone, filmed it, knowing the evidence would come in handy. But the real surprise was a text from Mike later that day. HOA got your complaint, he wrote. We're reviewing it. Lisa just called screaming, but no one cares. She's digging her own hole. I laughed out loud, setting the phone down. After sending the HOA complaint, I waited in a mix of nerves and excitement. I knew Lisa wouldn't sit still, but I also believed the rules she always cited would finally bite her back. A few days passed in rare peace. No engine roars, no red SUV blocking my driveway. I started thinking maybe she'd given up. But then one morning, as I brewed coffee, a letter from the HOA slid through the mail slot of my Willow Creek front door. I opened the envelope, and a smile spread across my face as I read. The HOA had acted faster than I'd expected. Lisa was fined for 3 clear violations. First, her red SUV wasn't registered with the HOA, breaching the vehicle clause. $200 fine. Second, her backyard fence encroached on public land, violating land use rules. $500. Third, her loud parties exceeded noise limits. Another $300. Total, $1,000 due within 30 days, plus a demand to remove the fence or register the car, or face more penalties. The letter ended with a polite but stern line. Further violations will result in stricter consequences. I set the letter down, feeling like I'd won the lottery. Lisa was finally paying a price, and I didn't have to do anything but watch her dig her own trouble. But my joy didn't last long. That afternoon, as I sat on the porch reading, the familiar engine roared again. The red SUV rolled into my driveway, and Lisa stepped out, face flushed, eyes blazing behind her sunglasses. She didn't speak, just marched to the driveway's edge, pulled a handmade wooden sign and a hammer from her back seat, and with a few hard swings, planted it in the ground right on my concrete. I stood up, walked over, and read the scrawled black paint. Private parking. HOA only. I burst out laughing, unable to believe her nerve. Lisa spun around, hands on hips, glaring like I'd insulted her entire family. What's so funny? She snapped, her voice shrill. This is an official HOA order. You can't park here anymore. I crossed my arms, glancing at the sign, then at her. Official order, I asked, a touch of sarcasm in my voice. You just got fined $1,000 for breaking HOA rules, and now you think this homemade sign changes property law. Lisa's face stiffened, but she quickly regained her arrogance. This is how I protect my rights. She shot back, chin high. You think you're clever with that complaint, but you won't win. The HOA's on my side. I shook my head, pulled out my phone and called Mike, putting it on speaker so Lisa could hear. "Mike, you at the office?" I asked as he picked up. "Yeah, what's up?" Mike replied, sounding half asleep. "Lisa just put up a sign on my driveway that says private parking, HOA only. Is this official?" There was a pause, then a low chuckle crackled through the speaker. "No, not at all," Mike said, clearly trying not to laugh. "We just fined her this morning. She's got no authority on your land." Lisa paled but tried to salvage it. "That's not the point," she yelled into the phone. "He's damaging my property by taking that sign down." I raised an eyebrow. "I haven't taken it down," I said, then turned to her. "But I will now." I set the phone down, stepped to the sign, and with one light tug, it popped out of the soft mud. Lisa's craftsmanship, clearly not as solid as her confidence. I held it up, looking at her. "Anything else to say?" Lisa stomped her foot, mud splashing onto her sneakers, already dirty from the earlier stuck car fiasco. "You'll pay for this," she growled, then lunged to snatch the sign from me, nearly slipping in her rage. "I'll sue you for vandalism." She stormed back to her SUV, tossed the sign in the back, and peeled out, tires squealing on the concrete. I stood there, phone still in hand, hearing Mike's laughter echo from the speaker. "She's really lost it," he said. "But watch out, she doesn't give up easy." I hung up, staring at the fresh tire marks on my driveway. Lisa might retaliate, but she'd just been hit with a hefty fine, and I had proof in my pocket, the video of her planting the sign. I knew she was plotting something bigger, but this time, I was ready to take it on. After Lisa's sign retaliation stunt, I knew she wouldn't stop there. Her arrogance was like a fire. The more you doused it, the fiercer it flared. A few days later, my phone buzzed with a text from Mike. "HOA meeting tonight, at the park. Lisa's causing a scene. You should come." I sighed, knowing this might be the final showdown. I grabbed a jacket, took my phone with all the videos I'd recorded, and drove to Willow Creek's Central Park, where HOA meetings often happened under dim streetlights. When I arrived, a small crowd of about a dozen people had gathered around a folding table on the grass. Mike stood off to the side, holding a water cup, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Evelyn sat in a folding chair, her straw hat slightly askew, eyes twinkling like she was waiting for a good show. And at the center Lisa stood, waving a stack of papers, her shrill voice ringing out like a campaign speech. "This neighborhood has standards," she declared, gesturing dramatically. "But some people are dragging our property values down." I stepped closer, and Lisa immediately pointed at me. "As many of you know," she continued, her voice rising, "we've got a problem with a trespasser and harasser. I've been stalked, threatened, right here in our own neighborhood." She held up her papers like undeniable proof. "So I'm officially submitting a petition to expel disruptive homeowners from our community." I raised an eyebrow, sitting next to Evelyn, who whispered, "She's lost it." I let Lisa go on, curious how far she'd take it. No one clapped, no one nodded. Instead, people exchanged confused or annoyed looks. An older man coughed. A young woman fiddled with her phone like she wasn't listening. Lisa didn't seem to notice, lost in her own drama. "What do you mean by expel?" I spoke up, my voice calm but loud enough to interrupt. "You want to kick me out of my own house, my property, because you got fined." Lisa flushed, turning to me with eyes blazing. "You've been aggressive toward me," she screamed. "You stalked me, vandalized my property." She jabbed a finger at me, her red nail trembling. "You're a danger to this neighborhood." Mike raised a hand, trying to keep order. "Lisa, calm down," he said, then turned to me. "Ben, got anything to say?" I stood, pulling out my phone. "I've got proof," I replied, playing the videos of Lisa parking on my driveway, including the sign incident. "This is my land. She parks here every day, even after I asked her to stop. The cops confirmed she's trespassing. And that sign she put up, fake." Mike confirmed it. Lisa opened her mouth to argue, but I held up a hand. "There's more," I said, pulling out the HOA fine letter. "She's broken 3 rules. Unregistered vehicle, encroaching fence, excessive noise. If anyone should be expelled, it's not me." The crowd murmured. Evelyn clapped lightly, chuckling. Mike snatched the papers from Lisa's hand, flipped through a few pages, then shrugged. "Lisa, there's no signatures here," he said, with mock surprise. "No one signed your petition." Lisa froze, her face turning tomato red. "They're scared of him," she yelled, pointing at me. "Scared he'll film them like he did me." "You mean film on my own land?" I asked, sarcasm dripping. Someone in the crowd, maybe Tom, I wasn't sure, muttered, "She's bothered me too." Lisa spun around, glaring, but no one took her side. Evelyn stood, leaning on her cane, her voice clear. "We've put up with her long enough," she said. "She once told me to take down my front yard flag because it didn't match the aesthetic. Enough's enough." Mike nodded. "She's filed more complaints than all of us combined. None of them hold up." The crowd murmured agreement. Mike called for a vote. "Who wants to put Lisa on HOA probation? Meaning any more violations get a steeper fine." Nearly every hand went up, even the young woman who'd been on her phone. Lisa grabbed her papers back, muttering something about corruption, then stormed off, her steps heavy on the grass. After the HOA meeting, I figured Lisa might finally give up. On probation, with no support and a bad reputation, she'd have to know she'd lost. But I forgot one thing. Lisa wasn't the type to quit when cornered. She was like a wild animal, wounded and more ferocious. And this time she pulled out a final blow. A zoning complaint I didn't see coming. One morning as I mowed the front lawn, a small white truck parked in front of my driveway. A middle-aged man stepped out, wearing a green polo, holding a clipboard, and introduced himself as a Willow Creek city planning worker. "You aware of a zoning complaint about your property?" he asked, his tone flat like he was reading a script. I stopped the mower, wiping sweat from my brow. "What complaint?" I replied, though I already suspected the culprit. He handed me a notice, explaining someone reported my driveway encroached on HOA managed land. I almost laughed but kept my cool. "Let me guess," I said, smirking. "Lisa sent this, right?" The man shrugged, a faint smile flickering. "Can't say who sent it, but you're not the first in this area to get one like this." He left after scheduling me to bring my property papers to the city office for review. I stared at the paper, feeling annoyed, but amused. Lisa really didn't know when to stop. I brought my land deed, a notarized copy from my grandparents, to the planning office the next day. The clerk checked it quickly, nodding to confirm my driveway was fully within my legal boundaries, not touching HOA or public land. "This complaint's baseless," he said, stamping resolved on the notice, but then he smirked, flipping to another page in the file. "Funny thing, looks like the complainant's the one breaking rules." I raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" He pointed at the map. The fence and shed 2 lots down, Lisa's place, encroached 2 feet onto public land. She built out without permits. I could hardly believe my ears. Lisa, the self-proclaimed rule enforcer, was the real zoning violator she'd tried to pin on me. I held back a laugh. "So what happens to her?" I asked. He shrugged. "2 options. Move the fence and shed back, or pay a big fine. We'll send her a notice today." I left the office, feeling like I'd just watched a comedy with the perfect ending. A few days later, another city worker visited Lisa's house. From my porch I saw her step out, hands on hips, yelling at him like she could shout reality away. But this time no one cared. Within 2 weeks, a fine notice arrived. $2,000 for the zoning violation, plus $500 for ignoring the first warning. Lisa refused to move the fence, arguing with the city over the phone. Tom told me later, looking exhausted, but in the end she couldn't fight the law. Word spread fast in Willow Creek. Lisa, once the neighborhood terror, became its biggest rule breaker. One morning, I saw a for sale sign staked in her front yard. She stood there, yelling at workers dismantling her fence, but they just shrugged and kept going. When she glanced at me, standing on my porch with coffee, her eyes burned like she wanted to torch the whole place. "Happy now?" she snapped, her voice hoarse with anger. I sipped my coffee, smiling. "Very happy," I replied. She stormed inside, slamming the door, and that was the last I saw of her stirring trouble. A month later Lisa and Tom moved out. A moving truck left Willow Creek quietly. No fanfare. The neighborhood threw an unofficial BBQ soon after. Mike called it Liberation Day, though no one said it outright. Evelyn brought pie. I chipped in beer, and for the first time my driveway was free of tire marks. Mike clinked his beer can against mine, grinning. "Place is quieter since she left," he said. After Lisa was gone, Willow Creek felt like a weight had lifted. No more roaring engines, no more scrawled homemade signs, and most importantly, my driveway was finally at peace. I spent a few days scrubbing the last tire marks off the concrete, feeling like I was erasing a long nightmare. Evelyn walked by, straw hat on, grinning wide. "Look at you, like you just won a war," she said. I laughed back, because I did, but suburban life never stays peaceful forever. One morning as I sat on the porch sipping coffee, a moving truck rolled into the street by Lisa's old house. I held my breath for a second, wondering if another Lisa was arriving with a new SUV and coffee cup in hand. The truck stopped, and a woman stepped out, stretching in the sunlight. She looked normal, brown hair tied loosely, wearing a t-shirt and jeans, no oversized sunglasses or arrogance. She glanced my way, waving with a friendly smile. I stood, walked across the street to say hi. "Welcome to Willow Creek," I said, offering a handshake. "I'm Ben, next door neighbor." She shook my hand, her smile widening. "Thanks. I'm Jenna, just moved in. This place looks a bit old, but I like a challenge." She glanced around, then back at me. "Heard the last person here was special." I laughed, unable to hold it in. "Special's the nicest way to put it," I replied. Her name was Lisa, liked parking on my driveway, and citing HOA rules I'm not even part of. Jenna raised an eyebrow, then burst out laughing. "Seriously? Well, don't worry. I don't have a red SUV or plans to turn your driveway into a parking lot. I just want to plant some flowers and live quietly." She tilted her head, adding with a playful tone, "But my name's Lisa too, Jenna Lisa. Don't worry, not that Lisa." I nearly dropped my coffee but laughed hard instead. "You just scared me there," I said, regaining composure. "But if you promise no HOA rules or paper coffee cups, I think we'll be fine." Jenna nodded, eyes sparkling. "Peace treaty. I'll keep my car in the garage and stay out of your way." I nodded back, relieved. We chatted a bit more. She shared her plans to fix up the house, plant roses like Evelyn, and asked where to get the best coffee in Willow Creek. As she headed back to the truck to unload, I returned to my porch, sitting down with a smile. Sitting there, watching sunlight filter through the pines, I thought back on the whole Lisa drama. She turned my early days here into a battle, but she'd also taught me a lesson. Standing up for what's mine isn't just a right, sometimes it's a thrill. From driveway standoffs to police calls to HOA battles, I'd learned to turn her arrogance into a weapon against her. And now, with my driveway clean and the neighborhood calm, I felt like a true winner. Jenna walked by again, waving as she carried a plant inside. I sipped the last of my coffee, gazing at a quiet Willow Creek in the morning light. Maybe the drama was over, at least until someone else parks in the wrong spot. The story of Ben and Lisa in HOA. Lisa parks her car on my private driveway daily, then freaks out and screams, reflects a very real slice of life in the US today. Conflicts over personal property rights and pressure from community rules, especially in suburban neighborhoods like Willow Creek. In America, where private property is prized but often challenged by HOA regulations, or over-the-top neighbors like Lisa, situations like this aren't rare. Lisa, with her red SUV blocking Ben's driveway, represents the type who assume control beyond their bounds, a common figure in modern society, where some put ego over mutual respect. Ben, on the other hand, shows a patient but firm approach, filming evidence, rallying community support, Evelyn, Mike, and using the law HOA zoning to protect his rights. The takeaway from this story is specific and practical for real life in the US. Today, when facing a personal rights conflict, don't just react emotionally, arm yourself with knowledge and strategy. Ben didn't jump into yelling matches with Lisa right away. He patiently gathered video proof of her parking violations, studied HOA rules to counterattack, like spotting her unregistered car, and leveraged zoning laws to flip the script when she tried to retaliate. This reminds us that in a law-driven society like America, knowing your rights from deeds to local rules is key to self-defense. Plus, Evelyn's support and the community's apathy toward Lisa highlight the value of good neighborly ties. They can be allies in tough times. Finally, with Jenna arriving and promising no repeat drama, the story underscores that mutual respect is the most sustainable way to coexist, not confrontation like Lisa's. Learn from Ben, stay calm, get smart, and keep evidence handy. That's how to win real-life dramas in America today. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss the next neighborhood drama. Thanks for watching my driveway war. See you in the next video with more surprises from Willow Creek.